Hey y'all, today I'm in downtown Paris, Tennessee to share the buried story of what was known as Bloody Monday. It's a story of two shootings that took place here on the Paris Square on June 4th, 1888. The story involves two sons of a former Tennessee governor and two other prominent Paris families and a rivalry between two young men for the attention of a beautiful young woman. Paris has several murals around town depicting noteworthy past residents, and this mural of a shooting really caught my attention, so I had to do some research on it. The painting depicts Will Edmonds being shot by Kenny Porter at a saloon on the square. Kenny was a son of former Tennessee Governor James D. Porter. There's a plaque underneath the painting that gives some information about the shooting. In the background in the painting behind the bar, you see a second shooting, which happened the same day, just an hour later, and that shooting involved Kenny's brother, Dudley Porter. This turned out to be a very complex and layered story, but if you'd like to know all the details, Thomas Gary Wallace wrote a very detailed book on this called Bloody Deeds, Governor James D. Porter's Wayward Sons. I got most of my information for the video from Beth Fay with the Henry County Archives and Genealogy Library. She and Stephanie were very helpful in researching this video, so thank you, ladies. I appreciate your help. Governor James Davis Porter was born in Paris in 1828. He was the 20th governor of Tennessee and was in office from 1875 to 1879. He married Susanna Dunlap in 1851, and they had 6 children. Sadly, their 2 eldest children, John and Lily, twins, born in 1852, would both die within 2 days of each other in 1858. The 2 youngest of their remaining 4 children, Dudley Porter and Thomas Kennedy, better known as Kenny Porter, would go on to cause great shame and worry for their parents and cost them much money for their many arrests over the years and their troubles with the law. Their son Dudley, although well educated, seemed to have a talent for getting himself into trouble. After several run-ins with the law and an indictment for shooting a man in upstate New York while he was up there for school, Dudley severely cut up a man with a knife in a barroom fight in Nashville in 1883. Although his victims recovered from their wounds, Dudley made his situations worse every time by fleeing arrest. But despite the gravity of his situations, he was acquitted, and his last outcome seemed to give him a new lease on life, and he married Miss Clinty Atkins the next year in 1884, and he was soon a proud husband and father. His brother, Kenny Porter, was courting young Nellie Edmonds, and she was a central figure in the events leading up to Bloody Monday. Nellie was a beautiful and vivacious girl who reveled in the rivalries between her suitors, claiming that her beaux were among the most handsome and chivalrous men in the South. Her brother, Will Edmonds, certainly lived his life in the fast lane and was seemingly always in trouble as well, but he was very protective of his sister. Their father was Dr. Samuel Edmonds, a prominent physician in Paris. Then one night in July 1887, apparently at Nellie's invitation, Alex B. White, a young, successful businessman in Paris, who was also the cashier at the commercial bank, came to the home of Nellie to call on her. But Kenny Porter was already there. So Nellie stepped outside and she told Alex to leave, that Kenny was already there and he'd been drinking. Alex left, but Kenny followed him out just a few minutes later, and they both drew their pistols in the street and began firing at each other. Neither was hit, but Alex brought charges against Kenny, saying he tried to kill him because he was trying to court Nellie. Then, in October of that same year, a terrible incident occurred at Ackland's Saloon in Paris. Kenny Porter was there drunk and boasting that he could whoop anybody in the bar, including Alex White's younger brother, Jonathan White, who happened to be there. They had words, and Kenny pulled a knife on Jonathan and began to cut and severely stab him. Doctors Felix Porter and Dr. Samuel Edmonds, Nellie's father, provided the best care they could to young Jonathan, but a week later he died from his injuries on Halloween night, 1887. Then in April the following year, 1888, Kenny and Nellie were out on a buggy ride together. At about 11 o'clock, Kenny took Nellie home, and he took the horses to their stables, and he started walking up Depot Street towards the square when he met Nellie's brother Will in the street. Will told Kenny he was going to kill him, and for Kenny to defend himself. Kenny drew his pistol, but Will shot first, hitting Kenny in the chest, just missing his heart. Kenny was taken to his father's house on Dunlap Street in precarious condition, with little hope for recovery. But just 2 weeks later, he was indeed making a miraculous recovery, and he survived. On June 2, 1888, Will Edmonds was arraigned and charged with felony assault for shooting Kenny Porter. But due to lack of time, his case was continued, and he could either post a $2,500 bond or stay in jail. 7 men helped to secure his bond, including Alex White, the brother of Jonathan White. So he was released from jail. But little did they know he would be dead just 2 days later. On Monday, June 4th, 1888, Will Edmonds had come to town and was standing nonchalantly on the west side of the town square when Kenny Porter, just now recovered from his April gunshot wound, came up Market Street with a friend and entered Wright and Edwards' saloon. Will remained outside near the saloon's corner. Kenny had one drink and went back outside, where he found Will momentarily looking away. Kenny took advantage and fired 3 shots before Will could draw his weapon. Will was hit 3 times in the left arm, but was finally able to draw his pistol, and more shots were fired by both men. Will was hit again above the hip and fell to the ground. He was carried to a nearby drugstore and then to the Carter house, where he later died from the effects of the last shot, which had perforated his abdomen. Kenny fled through the rear of the saloon. In this video clip of Will's grave, you can see in the distance Kenny Porter's headstone. Needless to say, the whole town of Paris was talking about the shooting. A little while later, Alex White was speaking to another man in front of McNeil's drugstore on the square when Kenny's brother Dudley arrived and heard Alex talking about Kenny's actions, shooting Will Edmonds when he was turned away. Dudley yelled, "You know you're telling a damn lie," and he put his hand in his breast pocket to draw his weapon. Alex was quicker, though, and fired 2 shots before Dudley could draw. Dudley died in just a few minutes. Alex was later exonerated for the killing, claiming that he fired in self-defense, with witnesses testifying that they saw Dudley Porter reaching for his gun. Alex White would go on to become a very successful and prominent citizen of Paris. He married Rassie Hoskins in 1890. And he died young, though, at age 54 in 1912. Just 8 months after Bloody Monday, Nellie Edmonds married Kenny Porter, the man who killed her brother. Astonishingly, Kenny was never convicted of any crime, thanks to his father's prominent position and his financial support to hire defense attorneys. Nevertheless, Kenny Porter never really learned his lesson, continuing to get into various scrapes and troubles over the years, including shooting his own lawyer. In his will, Governor Porter specifically stipulated that neither Kenny nor his wife Nellie should ever receive anything from his estate. Kenny and his wife settled in Paducah, where Kenny worked as a horse trader. Nellie died in 1956 at age 86. Kenny died in 1963 at age 94. After suffering for a week, he died from 2nd and 3rd degree burns covering his face and body. He had accidentally set himself on fire while smoking his pipe. He is buried in Paris City Cemetery, not far from the 2 men he killed, Jonathan White and Will Edmonds.